All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I see a few people are still joining, but we've got a lot to do today, and this is going to be some fun, exciting work. So first of all, thank you for joining us. My name is Jen Weiss. I'm a senior policy associate at the Nicholas Institute. We're part of Duke University. And on behalf of our partners in this project, Appalachian Voices and the North Carolina Justice Center, we really want to thank you for joining us today for this workshop. We've been working on this for a few months and we'll talk a little bit about it, but we are just so excited that you are here today and then we get to have this discussion with you. So thank you for spending the next 3 hours with us. It's going to be really fun. A couple of just real logistic items off the bat. The webinar will be recorded and we'll be sending that out in an email in the coming days. Please keep your lines muted. When we get into the breakout rooms later, we'll be able to unmute and have some conversations back and forth. But in this main area, there's going to be probably about 80 or so people joining. So please keep your lines muted. If you do have questions, either during this main session or in the breakouts, please feel free to use the chat function at any time. We will be monitoring that. And if you are calling in today on your cell phone, if there is a way that you could send to us your name associated with the number so that we know everybody that's attending, that would be wonderful as well. So just quickly, this is our agenda, and then we'll get into the meat of it. We're going to have a quick welcome from a very important guest, and then we'll do some introductions and objectives of the workshop. We'll give you a little brief overview of what energy insecurity in the Southeast looks like. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms. And this is where we really get to dig in and talk about some challenges and barriers and solutions that could help to address energy insecurity. We'll do a quick report out after that, and then we'll talk about next steps. Next slide, please. But first, I am just really thrilled to introduce you all to someone that you probably don't need to be introduced to, but North Carolina Senator Denise Salvador is with us today to do a welcome. And I'm just going to read briefly from her bio. She's an incredible person, and I've just been so happy to know her over the years and everything that she's done. But I wanted to share it with those of you that don't already know her. Senator Salvador reshapes the way we use and engage with energy. She is a customer engagement expert with a background in economics and entrepreneurship. And she's the founder of groundbreaking organizations like Renewable Energy Transition Initiative, or READY, a nonprofit she founded in 2013, which is focused on helping low-income families sustainably reduce their energy costs and gain access to cutting-edge technology. Senator Salvador is also a TED 2018 fellow. If you've never seen her TED Talk, look that up. Very good. Recipient of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte Young Alumna of the Year Award, and recognized as one of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Black Chamber of Commerce's 30 Under 30. She is a member of the Mecklenburg County Air Quality Commission and served on advisory councils for NCSEA and NEAUC. She assumed her office in January of 2021 after winning election to the North Carolina Senate to represent the area in which she grew up, District 39. In her position as a state senator, she is focused on energy, environmental, entrepreneurship, and environmental justice policy. Her legislation encourages energy security in North Carolina and increased entrepreneurship. I am just so thrilled that Senator Salvador has the time today to give us a welcome, and thank you for joining us, Senator.
Yeah, thank you so much. I certainly appreciate it. And I got to say, since assuming office, I haven't been as involved in terms of day-to-day living it in and out with energy. So the opportunity to come and be with you all for at least a little bit, I certainly wanted to seize that because I certainly miss it, and want to just first thank all of you for your work. I think that this work is incredibly important, particularly in the Southeast, where we do see high rates of energy insecurity and high energy burdens. So I think that this work is extremely important, but I am someone, even now that I'm further removed from the work, that has always believed that communities and the people closest to the problem should be those that are driving the solutions. I think that when we have that at the core and center of our policymaking, is much more robust, is much more thoughtful of potential unintended consequences consequences and just all of the things that really should be thought about when driving policy. And so I am personally looking really forward to what comes out of this working groups and how, particularly in North Carolina, but really across the Southeast, we can work to get it implemented. And certainly know that you have me as an advocate in the North Carolina State Senate for that. And just to kind of circle back about why this work is so important, I think I'm probably preaching to the choir, is that we just know the many, many impacts that energy insecurity can have on individuals and households. Several years ago, there was some research out of Columbia University that showed a family that is energy insecure actually may have less of a calorie intake. And you start to see the way that having energy insecurity is just an interweaving issue on top of other things, because they may be forced to make difficult decisions too, because of the coping mechanism of knowing that they might have a disconnection or trying to avoid a disconnection, may choose to have a smaller meal or choose different types of food or make a difficult choice to not have the medicine they need in a timely manner. And so we start to quickly see the intersectionality of having high energy costs along with high medical costs and high housing costs, and how all of these things can really create a tough and overwhelming situation for many of our families, and how we have to think about core pieces of that, which I think energy insecurity is sometimes not looked alongside of those housing and other very high costs. So I just want to say I certainly appreciate all of your work, especially given that I am right now, most of my time is with the state Senate. I do have time for any questions if folks do have them, but otherwise I hope that, this welcome was sufficient for what you had in mind, Jennifer, and I look forward to seeing what comes from all of your work.
It's more than sufficient. Thank you so much for that, Senator Salvador. And yeah, if we do have a few minutes, does anybody have a question? You can either put it in the chat or just ask it. Okay, great. They'll probably come later, so we might have to get them to you later. Thank you so much for your time and for all the great work that you're doing. And however we can support you, let us know that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I actually met with a small group of probably about 5 or 6 folks this morning. So happy to extend that to others. Just reach out to my office, and happy to have small group conversations too. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, so with that great introduction, I'm going to move into a little bit more about the project team and some of our objectives. Next slide. So the objectives for today are, I guess, fourfold. One is that we want to foster this community of stakeholders. That's hard to do in a virtual setting, but we're going to try our best through the breakout groups to be able to kind of get you to know each other, connect with each other, network with each other. So everybody on this call has a focus on reducing energy insecurity in different ways, and so we thought this would be a good opportunity to just kind of foster this community together. We also want to create a shared understanding of the energy and security landscape with common terminology. And so we're going to take a little time at the very beginning here to give you a little bit of background and context and common terminology so that we're all coming to the space with a similar background. And then thirdly, we want to begin to identify challenges and solutions. And that's what the breakout sessions later today are going to be designed to do. We really want to hear from you any challenges you have or you've heard about with respect to energy insecurity. And we're going to really start to dig into what some solutions could look like. And that work will continue on over the next couple of months. And then finally, we want to introduce working groups. Obviously in a 3-hour session, you can't really dig in as much as you'd like to. So we're going to use this as kind of our kickoff spot to be creating these working groups where we'll dig in more deeply and we'll really get to some good solutions that we can move forward. Next slide, please. So here's the Energy and Security Core team, myself, as well as Rory McElmoyle from Appalachian Voices, Al Ripley and Claire Williamson from the NC Justice Center, and my partner in crime, Allie Garrett from the Nicholas Institute. I also want to give a shout out to David Bjorkback, who is kind of behind the scenes for us, but he is the mastermind behind making sure that all of this goes smoothly. So thank you, David, for joining us today. We could not do this without some fantastic advisory board members. So I thought it would be good for me just to give them a huge shout out. This group has been working with us since January and helping to guide this process, helping us to figure out, what do we need to cover? What are all the different people that we need to invite to this? And they're going to continue to work with us through this one-year project. So just quickly, here are the advisory board members, and a big thank you to all of them that are here today. Duan Andrade from Solar and Energy Loan Fund, SELF, down in Florida. William Barber III from the Climate Reality Project. Carmen Bingham from the Virginia Poverty Law Center Project. Marilyn Brown from Georgia Tech. Will Bryan from Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. Chandra Farley from the Partnership for Southern Equity. Therese Griffin from Dominion Energy, South Carolina. Lonnie Hannon from Tuskegee University. Louise Mack from Prosperity Unlimited. Aaron Rose from 3 Cubed. Mike Smith from the Electric Cooperatives of South Carolina. Stacy Washington from the Energy Office in South Carolina. And Chris Woolery from Mountain Association in Kentucky. So just a huge thank you to this brain trust of people and ideas and expertise. It's been fabulous working with them so far, and I can't wait to continue the work. So I am now going to turn it over to Al Ripley from the NC Justice Center, who's going to give you a little bit more background and context for where we're starting today. Al?
Thanks, Jen. And can I get a thumbs up from somebody if you can hear me okay? Okay, good deal. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. And good afternoon. It's wonderful to see so many talented and dedicated people on this call. And I really want to give a shout out to folks at Duke for all the work they've done on this project, and my colleague Claire Williamson and Rory, who've really done the lion's shares of this work. But we want to take a minute to talk about the definitions and some of the context that we have these conversations about energy burden and energy insecurity. And energy burden is generally thought of as the percentage of household energy expenditures relative to overall household income. And factors affecting energy burden include household income, poverty, cost of energy, energy efficiency of the home, number of occupants, climate conservation, knowledge, access to efficiency, and renewables. Sometimes you'll hear the term of, or the expression that people that have an energy burden of more than 6% are overly burdened by their energy costs. And some folks think that that number it really should be lower than that. I'm one of those that think that for people who are really low income, that 6% of their income going to energy costs is really too high. And so I like to think that people that are at 2 and 3% of their income when you're only making $24,000 a year is a real difficult dynamic for those families to bear. So there's ongoing conversation about what we should always reference as appropriate cutoff for energy burden, but generally speaking, that's the term and how it's used, and we want to use it for today. And then we often use the word energy insecurity, the lack of sustained affordable access to necessary energy service without foregoing other necessities. So for example, your energy service can include the maintenance of healthy indoor temperatures, lighting, refrigeration, access to essential communication and other functions in the home that are important. I see someone saying you're having sound problems. So are folks having trouble hearing me, or are they okay? All right, I'm still getting thumbs up from folks. So maybe it's just one person on their end. And then conversely, the loss of access to electricity through disconnection of service for non-payment is the most dire situation experienced by families that are energy insecure. So, when we look at these issues and we see families that are at the federal poverty level, they have a significant energy burden because they're spending 9%, for example, of their income to pay their electric bills. And then we would also call or acknowledge that those families are also energy insecure because it's difficult for them to keep the lights on and to maintain their utility service. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at some of these dynamics across the country. Now, I always want to emphasize when I use maps like this is simply because you might be in a state where, let's take California, the low income energy burden as a percentage of income is 4 to 6%. Or you might be in a state like North Carolina where it's 6 to 8%. or in a state like Mississippi where it's 12 to 14%, it doesn't mean that you look at this map and say, oh, California doesn't have an energy burden problem. Don't worry about them. These are averages. In every state in the United States, there is a significant number of people who are not able to pay their energy bill and are experiencing energy burdens that are not sustainable, and they're energy insecure. So these maps, I think it's important to acknowledge, are a way to be able to look at these dynamics across the country on a notion of averages, but it shouldn't be used as a way of saying, well, these states don't have a problem while these states do. It's a way all these states have a problem. It's just the way that we can look at where it is more pronounced than perhaps other states are. So the first map there, you can see percentages of energy burden across the United States. You can identify your state and see where you fit in that spectrum of energy burden. And then you can compare that to average energy prices. And this is from data from 2015. And you can see that while in some areas in the Southeast, prices might be relatively low, incidents of energy burden are relatively high. And so in the South, we are very concerned about the dynamics that people that are low income and people that live in communities of color face in these challenges. It is definitely a problem in the South. If we could go to the next map, that'd be great. So we also see different types of disparities and racial disparities when we look at these statistics. These are national statistics. And we can see, generally speaking, in this first box that median energy burden of household income is 3 times higher than that of non-low income households. We can also see that energy burden of low income multifamily households, and those are people that live in apartments, of course, is 2.3 times higher than that of other multifamily households. And then we can start breaking down this data and looking at impacts on different segments of the population. So for example, if you look at dynamics facing seniors, the median energy burden of older adults, 65 plus, is 36% higher than the median household energy burden of people younger than 65. We can look at some of the dynamics around race and ethnicity. The median energy burden of Black households is 43% higher than that of white non-Hispanic households. And the median energy burden of Hispanic households is 20% higher than that of non-white Hispanic households. And then finally, in Native American communities, we also have similar dynamics where the median energy burden of Native American households is 45% higher than that of white non-Hispanic households. So some really troubling and, in my view, disturbing statistics that we need to address through this work. And then finally, we overlay this with the pandemic. And a lot of the policymakers that I talk to, and that my colleague Rory and others talk to, will say to us when we're talking about dynamics around the pandemic, well, you know, these are just some temporary problems. We'll get back to normal soon. You know, as soon as everybody's vaccinated, everything will be okay. And I always have to remind policymakers that these dynamics pre-existed the pandemic, that many people, and we'll be hearing from Reverend Woodbury in a moment, have been advocating and champions trying to fight for the needs and benefits to help communities of color and low-income communities across the United States for years and for decades. These problems have been around for a long time. And so certainly the economic recession hurt, caused by COVID, hurt a lot of people that are low income and damaged their employment status. We know that COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted many of the communities that we care the most about, not just from the standpoint of losing jobs, but the rate of spread in those communities, in part because of the types of jobs that many people that are in those communities have. And then we're seeing those dynamics across the Southeast and the difficulties that people are struggling with. But I think it's always important to keep the pandemic in the broader context, that these problems predated the pandemic. The pandemic has certainly exacerbated these issues, but after the pandemic is over, and hopefully that will be soon, we still have to try to address these issues as best we can and in the most constructive ways that we can. So with that, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Reverend Woodbury. Now, I have a lot of friends and family in South Carolina, and when I talk to advocates in South Carolina, they are always talking about Reverend Woodbury and the incredible work that he does. And I'll be the first to acknowledge that I have not had the pleasure of meeting Reverend Woodbury in person. but he has been a champion for communities that are low income for many years, and communities of color. He's a powerful advocate on these issues. And I know that I've talked to the advocates in North Carolina, like Suzanne Tuttle and other colleagues who work in South Carolina, and they're always very impressed and very thankful to have an advocate like Reverend Woodbury on their side championing the cause. So with that, Reverend Woodbury, it's wonderful that you could join us today. And it's very good to at least meet you during a call. And one day I want to come down to South Carolina and meet you in person. But thank you for being with us today.
And thank you so much for that valuable information. You know, it takes all of us together in order to make this transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a clean, renewable energy economy, and even just giving people, whether we're using fossil fuel or gas, how do we close the gap? How do we move forward with equity so that we're not leaving people where they are? And so I want to give a really big shout out to everyone on the team, whether they're the core team or the advisory team, or just participants, volunteers, etc. When we look at the two factors that were mentioned, energy burden and energy insecurity, I first have to lift up the fact that the numbers are actually worse than what we're seeing with the averages. And the reason why I say that is because you have to literally be in the community to know that oftentimes while people are struggling to pay their energy bills may not being paid by the actual resident, the energy user themselves. And so, for example, I know of a case in Marion County where there was an elderly woman, and through no fault of her own, she didn't report all of her property, and she lost her Social Security for an entire year. And so for an entire year, one of her children actually paid all of her household expenses, including her utility costs. Or once I was in a barber shop, and while I was in the barber shop, I overheard a conversation, and the person in the barber shop turned to me and said, "Reverend, I know what you just heard sounds bad, but let me explain what I did and why I did it." And what he explained to me was that there was a single mother who actually conducted a transaction with him where he gave her $40 or $50. I can't remember exactly what it was, but in return, she let him use her EBT card, and he got $60 or $80 worth of food. And he said to me, "Now it looks really bad what I did, and it surely was not legal." He said, "But what you don't realize is that a lot of poor people, a lot of struggling single moms may be getting WIC for their children. They may have an EBT card to buy food. They may even have, Section 8 to help pay their rent." But he said, who's paying their cell phone bill? Who's paying the car note? Who's paying the internet service so that the children are able to get on the internet and do their homework? And so we have an entire part of the underground economy in low income and people of color community is actually being utilized in a way to try to reduce people's energy burdens. And so we have to look at the fact that we have a lot of people who, because of their income, are struggling in that way. So we also have, people, a lot of folks who work in the restaurant industries who only make $2 and something an hour, including tips. And when you have the pandemic or when you have a climate impact, when something happens, when there's flooding, et cetera, and they can't get to work, that actually just worsens their financial situation and actually can increase their energy burden. And then we have the entire situation around housing and property, that so many people live in dilapidated houses that are energy inefficient, where they are literally heating and cooling the outdoors. And because they cannot afford to make their homes energy efficient, this increases their energy burden. And even when they get assistance, I remember several years back, before the housing bubble, we were involved with doing home renovations with the South Carolina Housing Trust Fund. And I can guarantee you that out of the 86 homes, because we rehabbed 86 homes, out of the 86 homes that we went to, the maximum amount of monies that they received, which was $20,000 per home at that time, most of the times, after we had dealt with safety and health issues, which the state mandates that you address first, by the time we fixed the floors that were breaking down, the railings, the steps, the electricity so there wouldn't be a fire, and those sort of things, plumbing, most of the time we left those homes knowing that they were energy inefficient and being unable to do anything about it. So when we look at energy, the energy burden, we have to realize that a great deal of it is because of the housing situation that people actually occupy. And then we also have energy insecurity. And, we addressed that a little bit in the fact that people don't have much security when it comes to paying their energy bills. And this is only going to get exponentially worse as we try to come out of the pandemic and we look at the recovery, because even if a person is working in a restaurant making $2.30 an hour plus tips, when we look at communities, in particular people of color communities, we see that a lot of these people will not be returning to work. Nationally, 17% of small businesses report that they will probably never recover from the pandemic. The number is closer to 40% when we look at African American businesses. And so when we look at how we deal with the energy, when we look at how we deal with the energy problem, we're going to have to look at what I call a continuum of change. We're going to have to look at energy efficiency. We're going to have to look at the social safety net and see that whether or not it can provide more safety for people. We're going to have to look at how we deal with people coming out of the pandemic and people having energy burdens. Once the moratorium is over, we may be faced with God knows how many people who will not be able to pay their past due bills. And so energy insecurity has to be addressed by energy efficiency, by improving the state of our housing in South Carolina. We also have to look at it in terms of our social safety net. We have to look at how are we going to deal with the energy debt once the moratorium is over. And we also have to look at how do we reduce energy burdens and security for people in terms of giving them access to clean, renewable energy like solar. Because we know most people, and I'm winding up, most people really can't afford to put solar on their homes because of the way that the tax credits are situated. Because for most low-income people and working class people, they don't expect to owe IRS and the South Carolina Department of Revenue or wherever state they're in. They don't expect to owe them money. They're hoping for a refund check instead, which means that oftentimes when they do put solar on their homes and they're not eligible for tax credits, they merely increase their debt and increases their inability to pay their energy costs. So there needs to be a continuum of change in how we deal with people of color and low wealth communities in order to reduce their energy burdens and also to make them more energy secure. So I'm going to stop right here at this point and once again say kudos to everyone on the call, because we must address this issue. Otherwise, no matter how much progress we may make in the area of energy, we may well find ourselves creating yet another divide. Just like we have an educational divide, just like we have a digital divide today, let us not widen, but instead let us try to constrict the existing energy divide that we have in our country today. Thank you very much. And I don't know if we have time for questions or not.
Thank you very much, Reverend Woodbury. That was incredibly insightful. And thank you for sharing the stories, and thank you for sharing those impactful challenges. This is the perfect way for us to go into our breakout groups in a couple minutes, because we want to be keeping all of these stories and things in mind as we're thinking through the challenges as well as the hopefully solutions, right? I love the continuum of change idea that you had. We have to be continually thinking of how we are going to change this. So thank you so much for joining us and for speaking with us today. I'm going to move along, and I know Reverend Woodbury is going to be in one of our breakouts later, so I'm sure if there are questions, if you drop them in the chat, he would be up for answering them. I couldn't have set it up better. So thank you, Reverend Woodbury, for setting up the reason why we are having this project. Next slide, please. You know, we've been working, the team have been working for many years in the space, and it just became clear that there's a lot of fantastic work that's going on, but there's not one collaborative that would bring everybody together to discuss how in the Southeast we can all come together and come up with solutions. And so we embarked on a one-year project to do a few things. One is to really try to measure, if we can, and characterize the causes and impacts of energy burden and insecurity in the Southeast. We want to take those stories that the Reverend was just talking about and stories from other organizations and other people, and we want to elevate that, and we want to make sure that those stories are being heard by the decision makers that need to hear it. So one of our goals is really to do that piece of it. The second piece is to also, at the same time, be looking for these regional, sustainable solutions that can really address this energy insecurity issue and come up with solutions so that we won't be talking about this in 5 years, that we can create a space where it is more equitable for all. And then finally, and I said this at the outset, we want to foster regional collaboration. A lot of you already work together, and we realize that, but to the extent we can continue to foster that relationship and build networks, we really want to look to do that in the energy insecurity, the energy efficiency, and the equity spaces. I put this map up here, and I did see a little bit of talk going back and forth about the states that were included. The Southeast gets defined in many different ways. Sometimes it goes all the way out to Texas, and it definitely includes West Virginia. For the purposes of bounding this, we chose these states in green, but please do not take that to mean that we would not be very pleased to have people from other states come and be a part of our working group, be a part of our stakeholder group, because certainly energy insecurity is not just an issue in these 8 states. So thank you for that question and for that discussion. Please continue participating with us. We really welcome it. Next slide. So here's the project timeline. I mentioned that it's a one-year project. So the first 2 months we spent just in team planning. But the first phase just is wrapping up with this workshop. The first phase, we really, we established the advisory board, and then we started to do some research and data analysis. We're now going to be, after this workshop, kicking off the second phase, which is more of a policy analysis and final report. And if we go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about what each of these phases are. The first phase, like I said, was more research focused. We will talk about this in just a bit. A group of students at Duke University did a household and stakeholder survey to really try to collect qualitative and a bit of quantitative data about what's currently happening. So this went out to households that might be today experiencing energy insecurity to find out what type of trade-offs they're making, what is really happening out there, and helping them to tell their story. And then the second piece is to dig into a data analysis, utilizing and combining existing data and then maybe new data sets that we can identify to really characterize the scale and nuances of energy security. And so we'll talk a little bit more about where we are in that process. The deliverables from that were there was a report that the students did with the survey results, and we're happy to share that with all of you. And then this workshop in May is kind of a wrap up of this first phase, which gets us to the second phase on the next slide. Following this workshop, we are going to take all of the feedback and ideas and discussion that we're going to have in the breakouts this afternoon to form different working groups so that we can really dive in. You know, it's hard to do that in a 3-hour virtual workshop, but we really feel like we want to try to get a grasp of what are all the issues, what are all the challenges, so that we can, over the next 4 months, dig into each of those. We have potential working groups because we heard loud and clear that there are a few areas, and Reverend Woodbury actually talked about, I think, all of these. We realize that data is very important, but maybe challenging right now. Housing, we know, is a challenge. We want to be thinking through what types of policies or new program solutions that we can be working on together. Perhaps there are other utility solutions. We know that many of our utilities already do have some programs, but perhaps there are others. And there may be other working groups that bubble up after our conversation today. So we will be synthesizing all of the information from the breakouts today, and we'll be developing these working groups and reach back out to you to ask you to participate in some of these. The deliverables for this phase, we will have a second stakeholder workshop in September. Fingers crossed that will be in person. We really hope to have an in-person one, but if we can't, we will definitely do a virtual one, or we might do a hybrid one if that works. And then a final report will be out in November. Next slide. And with that, I said we're going to turn to a couple updates on the first pieces from our first phase. And so Roy from Appalachian Voices. The worst part about this is my daughter is going to be going to App State, and I keep saying App State because I can't say it. So I'll practice it. I'll practice it.
You'll be booted right out of town, Jen.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, yeah, let's talk about data. Data has been a big part of our first phase. And as many of us are probably aware, working in the space, that there is quite a bit of data related to energy costs and energy burden, particularly, and I would encourage folks who are not familiar with it, but particularly through the U.S. Department of Energy's low-income energy affordability data tool. It kind of provides a really high level but fairly detailed data set that you can really analyze data down to the census tract level. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of data at the household level that we can use to really assess energy burden and give us some insights into energy insecurity more broadly for the Southeast region. And it's also the data that's available, at least in the main data sets, are only related to general household characteristics. So again, for instance, with that lead tool, you can look at different income levels, whether comparisons between renters and owners, the building type and age of the buildings, and the primary heating fuel. But for the most part, it's outdated. It's not frequently updated. And there really is a need for comprehensive, updated, and readily accessible data on energy burden at the household level, and more importantly, energy insecurity, given that people experience energy costs and energy burden differently, which will hopefully inform more directed, targeted policy solutions and investments. So that's what we're hoping to achieve, but as you'll see on the next slide, there's a lot of barriers. So we need this data. We need to know exactly how many households and how many people experience energy insecurity, who they are, where they live, what factors are leaving them energy insecure and to what degree. For instance, energy bills, inefficient housing stock, healthcare costs, credit card debt, educational costs, just everything that people deal with on a day-to-day level. how they experience energy insecurity. Are they paying their power bill but sacrificing other expenses? And what are those expenses? What impacts is living in that condition? What impacts are those having on their health, on their livelihood, on just basic dignity? What assistance or other programs are available to them in their communities and on the state level? And are they sufficient for meeting the scale of the need? And I wish we had actually included one of the interns' reports on the low-income home energy assistance program, because I think that would have provided a lot of good insight as to just how LIHEAP funding is insufficient for meeting the scale of need. And then how energy burden and insecurity change over time and what factors they respond to most. If we understood this in a very detailed way, then we might be able to see which policy solutions are working the most, or where are there gaps and shortfalls that we need to fill to really start tackling this problem. Thank you. Sorry, next slide. There you go. And the Environmental Justice Lab at Duke University is currently working on an analysis to really dive down to look at a lot of these factors at the household level. They're recreating that lead tool that I mentioned to include race and ethnicity, as well as some other factors, and bring it down using iterative proportional fitting. And I saw that Kay Jowers is on this call if anybody has a question about how that works. But it's used to estimate the joint distribution of household income, race, ethnicity, housing characteristics, and household energy consumption at the census block group level. And we were really hoping to use other data sets related to debt and other factors to kind of weave into that. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to make this even a more sophisticated analysis than what they're already doing. Next slide, please. Where they are in the process. First, they have completed a matrix of nearly 200,000 probabilities for all block groups in our region to estimate whether a household is an owner or renter, the type of primary energy they use, the age of the house, income, and race. And they're currently using detailed public use microdata areas level data to impute energy expenditures by those characteristics at the household level. And in the future, then they're hoping to be able to develop a web interface or application through which everybody can interact with that data and zoom in on your state or communities that you are working in. Next slide. But there is a ton of data out there that is not readily available, or there's just certain barriers or other things that need to be overcome to be able to access it. Utility data. Utilities have household level data on energy consumption and costs. Obviously there's a lot of issues with utilities just being able to share the data. But if all of that was available, that's one base data source that would really help us here. Household level data for participants that have gone through the Weatherization Assistance Program, LIHEAP, who have received LIHEAP assistance, and other energy and housing program recipients. Rent, mortgage, cost of home insurance, cost of healthcare and health insurance, food costs, groceries, et cetera. I mean, just everything that adds to the expenses that low-income households experience or have to pay from month to month would really, if we could have access to all that kind of data, we'd really be able to understand energy insecurity from a data perspective for our region. Next slide, please. And like I said, it's not readily available. I'm sort of repeating myself at this point, or it's costly to obtain. And even where there is very detailed municipal level data, that is not available as detailed in a detailed manner for rural areas. And I think that's something that we really need to fix at the federal and state level. But really to get a deep sense of how people are experiencing energy insecurity and the impact it's having on their lives, other methods are needed. And I think this is where I'm going to pass it on to Claire Williamson at the North Carolina Justice Center to discuss the survey that was done to attempt to get to some more of that qualitative information.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, and help with me today is one of our advisory board members as well, Stacy Washington. So the two of us are going to go through some of our survey results that we did during this portion. So next slide. As Jen mentioned, the survey was a project of some of the graduate students at Duke University, along with us on the kind of advisory board group. And we were set out to try to understand the trade-offs that folks were making, as well as the, the support, like the services or supports that would be helpful for folks. And what we're going to show you, like the survey is it's a small sample size, and it's actually doesn't cover every single state in the Southeast. Unfortunately, we had 166 complete responses. Most of those did come from South Carolina, probably a function of Stacy and all of her great connections down there to get this survey distributed. So thank you, Stacy. And okay, I'll just keep. And so if who's not talking or presenting could just, yeah, there you go. And so really this is what we're going to show you is we want to add to what Reverend Woodbury has created of some of the challenges that folks are facing, and what does it look like for people to have to be experiencing like energy insecurity across many different spaces. So Stacy, next slide.
So we're going to open and just give you some results from our survey. So this one is about how people pay. And in this survey, or this question in the survey, 28% reported paying with their stimulus check. So I want to go back. They were asked to comment on what happened over the past year. So this included the pandemic time. So 28% reported that they used their stimulus check to pay their bill, 9.5% credit cards, and 7.5% a short-term high-interest loan, like a payday loan or for a pawn shop. So people are using many different methods to pay those bills. And of note, since this was during the pandemic, from a national survey of low-income people conducted by Indiana University, they found about only 1/3 of respondents reported that they had received a stimulus check. So that's just something to add to the burden. Next slide. So we also asked the respondents to give some commentary about, what is causing these problems. So one said, I can pay off a credit card debt quickly, but the unexpected high bill was tough. You can only get assistance once with social services, and that's not in every month. So, people need more than just a one-time assistance. They need more help. It's not just a one-time problem. And then the applications are long and most of the time are not accessible. So that's another issue that's brought forward. Next slide.
Yeah, so then we also did look at disconnections. We had some questions about that. Thank you for putting in, Stacy, that this was really asking people to look back at the last year. I missed that up front, but around disconnections, we had, of the low income participants, 89% said they received a disconnection notice in the past 12 months, and about 28% of people who received a notice were disconnected. And I just want to note that once again, this is like maybe this is a small sample size, and those percentages were higher than what we have seen in that other comparable like national study, where the one conducted by Indiana University had found about 25% of survey respondents received a disconnection notice, and then about 10% of those folks were actually disconnected. But yeah, there you go. It still, disconnection, whether it's like, this is something that people are experiencing, not having electric utilities or water or gas. And so this is a quote that we did from someone who was sharing their experience of having been disconnected, and I'll read it here. So if you have a cutoff notice, you're at the risk of getting evicted. What about the ones that have already gotten evicted and the light bill had been turned over to collections? Now you can't rent from anyone because no one trusts you to pay your bills. So now me and my 25-year-old son are staying in a one-room motel. Money can't be saved due to paying $58 a night and eating on the go. So disconnections can start a cascade of other, instability around housing, and also around like the food that they're able to eat, and then the ability to save money and like, quote, get back on your feet. Like, it can be really destabilizing. And we just wanted to share that with you. So next slide.
So how are people managing? 2/3 of respondents reported wearing extra layers or blankets around the house, and over half indicated that they kept their house at a temperature that is warmer or cooler than is comfortable. And then our survey didn't cover this, but there was a lot of research done by one of our advisory board members in the TVA territory, and they found that people wouldn't invite their grandchildren over because it was too cold. So this is impacting quality of life, as well as just, it's not just about the dollars, it's about quality of life as well. And some people reported having difficulty sleeping when it was too hot in the summer or too cold in the winter. Some of the comments were constantly on the lookout for down trees to supplement their heating bills. And then they're trying not to buy things that they might need in order to make sure there's enough money to pay the bill. Next.
So on that theme of trade-offs, what we found was that people really do prioritize paying utility bills. We asked a series of different questions about, are you, which do you ever like not pay your utility bill to buy food or medicine? And what we found was most people, if they're making a trade-off, they are foregoing food or reducing what they buy so that they can pay those utility bills. And yeah, so here we go. And just to give some more context to this is, it's for one of the people, it's that my energy bill is the highest household expense. And they also, like, there's no options for renewable energy or energy efficiency programs in their area. And I struggle a lot. People struggle when they are having to make these trade-offs and manage.
And then what are some perceptions and solutions? So we asked everyone to, give us what they think is a solution to their problems. Many people, of course, said, just need more money, higher wages, increased Social Security, lower costs. One person even said just $250. They were very specific about that. You can give me $250 and I'll be, that'll help me. Home upgrades. Some people know what is needed, but just don't have the money. Central heating, instead of using space heaters, home insulation. One person just needed financing. They know what's wrong. They just aren't able to finance it and can't afford it. And then reducing uncertainty. Let the light bill be around the same thing every month. Not everybody has that option of having the where you can know your bill every month. So having that be something would be very beneficial. And now I'll hand it over. I think I'll go back to Jen.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you guys for all of that great summary of the work that's been done so far. And you can see, we're continuing to try to tell the stories and try to get more data, but this is a work in progress. And so we welcome, I'm just watching this chat and just amazed. I welcome all of this, continue the great chat discussion because we are documenting all of this and probably will be reaching out to many of you in the chat to discuss some of these ideas further. Also, if you did put certain resources in the chat, we can share those out to everybody when we do our wrap up after this workshop. So continue to put those in. Any resources that you are reading, want to read, think would be valuable to this group, please feel free to do that and keep that chat coming. All right, we are about 5 minutes ahead, but I think that's okay. I think what we'll do right now is take a little bit of a break. I do have 2:10 here, but since we're breaking 5 minutes early, I'm going to change that to 2:05 to give us more time in the breakout session. So if you could all just be back here by 2:05, I'm going to turn it over to Allie to talk a little bit about the breakouts, and then we're going to go break out. Thank you guys so much.
Welcome back. This has been great so far. I'm really excited to dive in deeper with all of you in the breakout sessions. All right, so far today, we have had the opportunity to learn together on this topic. Now we're turning to more of the interaction, the interactive part of our discussion. Through the breakout groups, we want to encourage all of you to just take the time to flesh out existing challenges and potential solutions to addressing energy insecurity in the Southeast. And really, we're going to take our time with it. We've got 90 minutes. We have time to just dive in deep to this. We're also going to spend a little bit of time identifying experts and individuals who we might be missing from this conversation. So we really tried to get the word out about this today and about the working groups that we'll be doing. But we almost certainly have missed people, and we're going to rely on you all to figure out who that is and bring that information to us so that we can ensure that this is a broad effort and to work together on that. So just some logistics, we will go into pre-assigned breakout rooms. Each room will have a facilitator and a note taker. And if you don't get automatically swept into the universe, into your breakout room, David, who is here supporting us, he will help you out. So don't worry about that. First, let's just take a second to look over the questions that we'll be discussing in our breakout rooms. So the work we'll do today is really going to lay the groundwork to enable us to put together policy recommendations that are directly informed by stakeholders across the Southeast, so you all and others who will join us. Today is very big picture. Like I said, no idea is a bad idea, just get it all out there. Then after this meeting, we'll form working groups that will dive deeper into the identified areas. You'll be invited to join those groups. We hope that you will. It'll be a couple of months of work together, but I think it'll be really fruitful at the end. Those groups will meet together for a couple of months, and then we'll be refining, researching, recommending solutions to address energy insecurity in our region. So specifically, we're going to be talking through the existing challenges and barriers to achieving energy security, existing opportunities, and that can really be anything from something maybe that you saw in another region, something that you've seen on a small level that if scaled up would be a really amazing solution. It can be something that you've never seen and you just had an idea at some point or have an idea right now that you want to try and implement. Put all of it out there for now, and we can figure out what makes the most sense going forward. The rapid fire discussion is intended to be sure that we get at each of these areas that have already been identified through the research. So we know that there are problems and solutions related to data, housing, policy and programs, and utility solutions. So we just want to be sure that if those don't naturally come up in your conversation around challenges and opportunities, that we get into each of those. Then we'll talk through who's missing, and then whether there are any specific subject matter experts that you'd really like to hear from. So that might be, I mean, the world's the limit, but someone that you saw one time who was a great speaker on energy insecurity and you really want to hear from them or want to bring them to this group, or someone at the local level who's really a leader, community organizer, folks like that would be great to recommend there. And in terms, just going back for a second, in terms of who's missing, that can be specific people, that can be organizations, that can be a group of people, maybe like a specific faith community or something that you just really think should be in on this conversation. And then we'll close with the discussion of what the greatest challenge or opportunity is related to energy insecurity that you discussed in your working group. There will be many that you discussed, but perhaps this would be something that there's just a lot of energy around, or something that came up and was a repeated theme. And that will be what we come back and do a brief report out on towards the end. And that report out will really just be about 10 minutes. So that'll just be something short and small. If there are any burning questions, I'd be glad to take them. You can also ask questions of your facilitators and your note takers. That might be a better route. But if there's anything burning, please feel free to go ahead. And David will be working to put us in our breakout groups. Hopefully y'all can see that okay. Great. So I am definitely leaving energized today. We had some great conversation in our group. Why don't we do a quick round of report outs? This will be pretty short, maybe just a couple of minutes each. We can start maybe with group one. Y'all want to jump in with some of your findings or where there was the most energy in your conversation?
Sure. Stacy Washington, South Carolina Energy Office, Group 1. And well, I always take away from all these conversations is that there's never enough money. There's always a need for money to fund all of these great ideas. And then there's just so much need. There's not enough money for the need. So some specific things we noted were the solution needs to fit the needs of a particular problem. And since this is a regional effort, there's no one policy that will solve the issue. It will need to change depending on the place. So we can offer a skeletal structure of the program and then tailor it for the different communities. And then access to consistent disaggregated data is a need that we wanted to highlight as an issue from our discussions.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. Group 2.
Sure thing. This is Mike, and we had a really robust discussion, and it'd be nice to have these discussions more often, actually, but it can feel hopeless. I think for us, the biggest issue is the persistence of poverty and the lack of political will to eradicate poverty, and the cultural will too, not just the political will, and the intersectional nature of housing, finance, energy, how it's all kind of depressed together. And really the persistent attitude of prejudice against people who are in that position. And almost like an attitude of, they deserve it. And that disconnection between, those who are in need and those who can help.
Thanks, Mike. Great. Group number 3.
Yeah, this is Roy. I'm tasked with reporting out. I guess we didn't identify just one, but there are 3 interconnected ones I think are important. One is there is a lack of meaningful connection to impacted community members. And related to that, there's not one regional solution for energy insecurity and all that it entails. Most solutions have to be made developed at the community level. So a scalable solution and scalability is important, but community with place-based focus. And I guess the other one, great comment from Aaron, that there are a lot of beautiful, brilliant people that are working on this issue, and seeing all of us come together, not just everybody, but and lending our gifts and talents and time to each other is a really huge opportunity, and something that we hope to continue moving forward.
Great, thanks, Rory. And then Will, you want to report out for our group?
Sure, yeah. Hey all, I'm Will Bramacia. Yeah, we covered a lot of the same ground, it sounds like, as some of the other groups. So I won't necessarily repeat, but I'll just say, we kind of flagged just, that existing programs are under-resourced and often not available in ways that are just kind of accessible to people who need them. And so there's this kind of, both lack of enough resources to really fully get work done, and often they're just not accessible to people, even if there is funding available. And we talked a lot about kind of the ways that the energy insecurity issue dovetails just with broader systemic problems, issues of income inequality that we see, I think particularly clearly in parts of our region, and some of the ways that energy insecurity can be kind of a bridge to begin working on those issues, at least in sort of a discrete way. And yeah, I mean, I think just, kind of to reiterate the point that Rory made, I think, there was also a sense that these solution sets have to, really be community based, long-term, right? It can't just be kind of a short-term investment in communities. It needs to be long-term, sustained partnership, really, to begin to address these issues. So I'll stop there. We talked about a lot of other things, but I'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, that was a great summary. Thanks, Will. Good. All right, Jen, I will hand it back over to you for some next steps.
Fantastic. That was such a great way to wrap up. And I mean, it's 3 hours. We've been together for 3 hours. Thank you for hanging with us. But I feel invigorated. I think the conversations that we've been having, while very overwhelming, are still the fact that we're all coming together to talk about it and to try to solve it together is just incredible. I think, Aaron, can I use your your tagline that Rory brought up, the lending gifts of our talents and time to one another? This is making me so happy to see this all happening. So from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of Allie, Rory, Al, and Claire, I want to thank you all for spending the last 3 hours with us. I want to thank you all for your participation in this and your continued participation. Our next steps, the most short-term ones, are we will be sending out the slides as well as the recording of this, and do our best to kind of summarize all of the chat discussion that was going on. then Allie and I are going to take a run through all of these great notes that we took during the breakouts and kind of, synthesize that, get that together, get that out to everyone. And we will be forming some working groups, more topical working groups for you to choose which ones, one or two, or however many you want to participate in, so that we can do deeper dives into some of these issues and really come up with some solid recommendations. So you be looking for some emails from us in the next week or so. And in the meantime, and the last thing I should say is that we will be sending out a survey tomorrow. I know sometimes when you sit on these, you think of something after the fact that you really wish you would have said. So we're going to send out a survey tomorrow to let you do that. If there are things that either you didn't feel comfortable saying at the time, or that you just thought of later in the middle of the night when you wake up, please send those to us, because we want to capture as many of the great ideas and things that you guys are thinking as we can. That's it for me. Any of my team have anything else you want to add?
No, thanks.
All right.
Everybody.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. We'll give you back 5 minutes, and looking forward to working with all of you wonderful, fantastically intelligent people in the future. Have a great night.
Thank you. Dr.
Thanks,
Erica
everyone.
Holloman Hill. And before folks leave, I know because we have the Atlantic South Coast, some of you are part of the Gulf Coast for a Green New Deal. What was left out was the Atlantic Coast South. We are in those conversations. Reverend Woodbury, I will be reaching back out to you, my brother, Dana, and the others, to talk about the Atlantic South for a Green New Deal, because we have coastal communities like the Gullah Geechee. I see Queen Quet on, Sapelo down in Georgia, that had issues that are similar, but yet also culturally different and relevant for the Atlantic coast. And we are in supporting, calling forth that creation using the Gulf South for Green New Deal's template already. So look forward to anybody looking to roll up their sleeves and help out with that great work.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. And would you be able to send either Allie or myself some more information on that we can share with people?
I sure will.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. We do have time. Any other announcements anybody wants to make? I should have given that opportunity. Nope. All right. Well, thank you all. Have a good evening, and we will talk soon.